Hello there guys, and welcome back to MurderTube. Now today's case is going to be a little bit different than some of the previous videos because it's not quite a murder case like some of those, but this is nonetheless a sick, strange and disturbing case. This is the case of Carl Tanzler. Now Carl was a German man born on the 8th of February 1877. After high school, he attended a medical university that he graduated from. He did briefly go to Australia, but by 1920 he had returned to Germany, and that is where he met and married his wife, Doris Schaefer. The couple had 2 children together. But Carl didn't really see a whole lot of opportunity in Europe. So in 1926, he emigrated to the United States. The couple ended up in Zephyr Hills, Florida. Because of course, all of the weird things always happen in Florida. It was only 1 year later though that Carl abandoned his family and moved to Key West. This is where he accepted a job at a hospital as a radiology technician. He accepted the job under the name of Carl von Kossel. He would quite often tell people that he was Count Carl von Kossel, and that his supposed ancestor was Countess Anna Constantia von Kossel. He also claimed that the spirit of the Countess would quite often visit him. Not only that, but during these ghostly visits, the Countess would show Carl his one true love. It was a young, dark-haired, beautiful, exotic woman. Which brings us to 1930, when a young lady was brought into the hospital who was suffering from tuberculosis. This was Cuban-American Elena Helen Milagro de Hoyos. Elena just so happened to be a young, dark-haired, beautiful, exotic woman. Elena was 21 at the time and Carl was 53, but he immediately fell in love with the young girl and recognized her as the one true love from these spiritual ghostly visits with his supposed Countess ancestor. Tuberculosis was typically fatal around this time, but Carl did everything that he could to treat and cure the young girl. While doing so, he would shower her with gifts of jewelry, clothes, all the while professing his love to her. No one knows for sure, but it's believed that this love was a one-sided thing and it was not reciprocated by Elena. Elena was single at the time, but she had previously been married a couple of years before, but her husband left her when she had a miscarriage. She was technically still married, so was Carl, but they were technically single, separated from their spouses. As hard as Carl tried, Elena passed away 1 year later on the 25th of October 1931, aged just 22. Her funeral was paid for by Carl. Not only that, but he also convinced her family to have an above-ground mausoleum built that he paid for as well. The mausoleum was locked and it had one key. And yes, Carl had that key. Carl would visit Elena's grave every single night, without fail. He claimed that her spirit would visit him while he sat next to her grave, and he would serenade her spirit and corpse with her favorite Spanish songs. But after 2 years of visiting every single night, Carl suddenly stopped showing up. He never showed up again. It wasn't because the obsession had died down, it was in fact the opposite. One night in April of 1933, Carl crept through the grave with a toy wagon. He stole Elena's corpse and using the wagon he took it back to his house. Now Alina had already been dead for 2 years at this point, so her body had decomposed quite a bit. So he used piano wire to attach her bones together. He put glass eyes in her eye sockets. He used cloth soaked in wax and plaster to replace the rotten flesh. He made a wig from her hair to put on her decomposed scalp. And he stuffed rags inside the body to keep the body shape. The corpse was dressed in stockings, gloves and jewelry, and he would often spray large amounts of perfume and disinfectant. And he used preserving agents to forestall the effects of decomposition. Carl talked with Alina's corpse. He serenaded her corpse. He danced with her corpse. And he slept in the same bed as her corpse. He treated this decaying, altered corpse like his girlfriend. Even though dead, he still loved her. Now, as sick, strange, and twisted as that is, he maybe went above and beyond and did something far worse. He placed a vaginal tube inside the corpse that would allow the old man to have sexual relations with the rotten corpse of this 22-year-old girl. 7 years. For 7 years, this corpse was his live-in girlfriend. He dated no one else and he slept with no one else. It was in 1940 when Alina's sister, Florinda, had heard enough rumors that she confronted Carl at his house, and the rotten, half-preserved corpse of her sister was discovered. Carl was arrested and charged with wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. Psych exams found him to be mentally competent to stand trial. Due to the twisted nature of this case, it of course gained a lot of media attention, but strangely, the vast majority of the public opinion was sympathetic to Carl. They viewed him as an eccentric romantic. Now, there wasn't really a victim hurt in this case, so how many years does someone spend in prison for stealing a corpse and living with it for 7 years? Well, the answer is none, at least in this case. The charges against Carl were dropped. See, his charges weren't for living with the corpse, and it doesn't appear that necrophilia was a crime during this time. So the crimes that he committed was destroying a grave and stealing a body, which happened 7 years before it was discovered and he was arrested and charged. The 5-year statute of limitations had expired by this point. He was let go, he couldn't be charged for the crimes, and he was an innocent man. Alina's remains were put on display at a funeral home for a short time, and then they were buried in an unmarked grave in a secret location. Carl's obsession, of course, did not stop. He created a human-sized effigy and what's known as a death mask, a mask of someone's likeness once they've died, to create his own Alina effigy that he continued to live with. He received his US citizenship in 1950, and it was 2 years later in 1952 that he died in his home with his Alina effigy girlfriend. Some people claim that Carl switched the effigy with the human corpse again, and that it was the corpse that was in his house when he died. While possible, it's unlikely. The information about the vaginal tube didn't actually come out until 1972, 32 years after Carl was arrested. Some people debate this as to whether it is true due to the amount of time that it took for this information to come out. 2 physicians recall seeing this vaginal tube in the corpse when they attended the autopsy in 1940, but neither of them spoke out about it until 1972. Some sources, articles, YouTubers will just tell you that he was having sexual relations with this corpse. While that is possible, no one knows for sure. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. That is something that is highly debated, and no one knows the truth. In 1982, an article was released as some renovation workers allegedly found a note written by Carl. She died because I gave this to her mercifully. I mixed the root of wolfsbane with asinine dilute. It was palatable, and my loved one departed this miserable world on October 25th, 1931. Suffer no more, sweet Alina. I have sent you to the angels with my golden elixir. If Alina hadn't died of tuberculosis, the obsession that Carl had on her likely would have been deadly, not just for Alina, but for anyone close to her. Being obsessed with someone so much that after they've died, you piece their corpse back together and live with it as your girlfriend for 7 years. And even after that, he had to make an effigy because he still could never get over this obsession with this young girl. If he truly did have sexual relations with the corpse, it turns a sick and twisted case into something even more depraved. But let me know your thoughts on didn't he have sexual relations with it? And the note, do you believe that it is legitimate or maybe it was faked? I personally don't believe the note for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think he would have poisoned her. I think he would have done everything in his power to try and treat and cure her to the very end. And also the note just seems like it goes out of its way to give too much information. It doesn't really need to say what he poisoned her with, given the date of the death, her name. There's a lot of information in just a short paragraph, and it seems like one of those where someone tries to fake a note and they put in more information than needed. Let me know your thoughts on that though, that's just kind of my opinion. The note was never tested for the handwriting or anything, so again, it's an alleged note, no one knows whether it's true or not. And just so you guys are aware, there will likely only be one video for the next few weeks or so, and that's for a few reasons. One is that I'm working on a few different requested cases right now that I've done some research on all of them, but due to one case being recent and the other two cases having a lot of speculation and he said, she said, they're all going to require a lot more research and fact-checking than some of the more straightforward cases. And because they're requested cases, I want to make sure I do as much research as possible for the people that have requested them. And on top of that, with Canada Day coming up July 1st, probably in most places in Canada, but at least my city, we have kind of a 4-day celebration, parades, fairs, all this type of stuff going on. We haven't had this stuff for a couple of years due to COVID, so it's going to make my full-time actual job, YouTube, I don't get paid for. My actual real life career is going to be very busy. I'm going to be putting in a lot of overtime because our city is going to be very busy, and myself and my officers are going to have to put in a lot of overtime to deal with a lot of stuff for the next kind of few weeks here. So I won't have very much time to work on videos. So it's going to be one for a while, but I will get back into a 2 video per week schedule at some point. Just bear with me for a little bit. Like always, like the video if you like it, dislike if you don't, let me know why. Be sure to subscribe and stay safe out there, guys. It is a very crazy world.